All right, we're live. We got people popping in here. We'll give it a couple minutes for people to pop in. Just so you know, there's a chat box, on the right side of your screen where you can just put in comments or say where you're from. We love to see where people are from. And just so everybody is aware, there's also a Q&A box where you can dump some questions in there for our panelists as we go along the night tonight. From San Francisco, awesome. Thank you, Steve. Oh, we're getting international.
Australia.
Look at that.
Atlanta, Vancouver,
Canada. Oh, more Canada.
All right.
So I just want to say, everyone, if you're seeing Kay Tuxford there, we'll say this again later when we have more people on.
Yes.
But she's in the throes of filming in New York City. So we're going to get the exhausted filmmaker take too.
Yeah, we are on topic tonight. Speaking of everybody who's signing in tonight, this is our Pipeline Symposium Town Hall event for December on filmmaking. So this is our hard truths on filmmaking. And we have some wonderful panelists here that Jeannie's going to introduce. Jeannie and myself, we're from Pipeline. Jeannie is the editor-in-chief of Pipeline Artists and the overall division of Symposium, where we're going to have a bunch of fun panelists and informational sessions and kind of the year-long conference, that we have for creatives out there. This is one of many more that we're going to be having. Jeannie's going to be leading that out. And I am the co-host tonight on that front. And so, Jeannie, why don't you take it away with a couple of intros? We already got 50 people up in here. That's awesome.
So Doug Richardson is a dear friend of mine. I actually met him on Twitter. Go figure. Screenwriter and novelist, and his movie credits include Bad Boys, Die Hard 2, and Hostage. And just a fun note, I actually sat on the couch in his writer house that Bruce Willis sat on. So my butt has been on the same couch as Bruce Willis. Just fun fact. Kay Tuxford is a writer and a DIY filmmaker, and you can see her in that Uber with her mask on, hard at work. And she also is a podcaster and a lecturer at Chapman University. Pratna Mohan's feature debut, The Miseducation of Bindu, she actually did that with Kay. Kay was working on that project too. And that project was executive produced by the Duplass brothers. And she also filmed Fighting for her family during the pandemic, and that was on Lifetime. And her third feature, Christmas is Canceled, has been picked up by Lionsgate, and it's going to be on Amazon Prime sometime this month. So do you have a date on that yet, Pratna?
December 17th, next Friday.
Sweet.
All right.
Just in time for Christmas to cancel it,
And if it's canceled, then does that mean we don't have to buy presents?
Yeah. You're welcome.
Thank you. And she's also the Dean of the Academic Affairs at New York Film Academy. So we have quite a range of filmmaking experiences. So just a little, there's a chat box where you guys can chat amongst yourselves. It's a little hard for us when you guys get going in there to pull questions out of that. So if you have a question for our panelists, if you can stick it in the Q&A box, which you should be able to see at the bottom of your screen, should just be a little QA and bottom right, I think, and then you can pop questions in there.
And we'll do our best to get to all the questions, but no promises on that front. So yeah.
We got through them all in publishing, so
you're pretty good.
So you guys have had like range of experiences. Doug, I know obviously big blockbuster stuff and all of that. I'm curious to know what got you all interested in being like filmmakers and writers for film? I know you all write as well. Anybody?
Well, since you mentioned my name, I guess I'll answer. It's no different than almost anybody else. I love movies. I loved movies since I was a kid. I still love them. They're a language I think I understand and I have learned to speak to some degree. So And there's no other reason than that, whether it be, making big movies or little movies. It's just you love movies. And that's all it takes. That's a hard truth, by the way. It's a very hard truth.
And one of the things too, like with Doug, I know that you were like one of the last studio writers, right? Like,
yeah, I'm that old. Thank you.
Well,
Appreciate
maybe tell people what that was, like what that.
The studios, yeah, the studio system used to have writers under contract, and you were under contract at that studio as a writer, pulling a weekly paycheck. Unlike, let's just say, a writer today might get, whether probably more so in TV than film, might get a deal, what's called an overall deal or a first look deal or something, where you get an office and a secretary and whatever, and maybe a stipend to show them your work and stuff like that. I actually was a Writers Guild minimum weekly paycheck guy at Warner Brothers when I was a wee child in showbiz. And I call it my Warner Brothers graduate film school program, because pretty much what I did for those 2 years, and thank you, Warner Brothers, it gave me a place to sort of learn about making movies, there on the lot in the studio and stuff like that, at a time which they don't do that anymore. They really don't. So I got to hang around and get all my stuff rejected and get paid for it, which doesn't happen. So that's a hard truth too. It doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah,
So.
and I'm curious if you feel like that's a missing part, like that maybe it would be great if they brought that kind of thing back.
I think what's huge and missing in at least Hollywood circles, and again, we're talking inside baseball, inside Hollywood, inside the studio system, the very large and, rotund system that it is that they used to develop talent, and they used to, throw a lot more money at writers who were new, and they take a chance on an idea. They take a chance mostly not on the idea, but the writer themselves, and hopefully that writer would turn into something for them, and either for them or somebody else. And that's a lot of where the term development came from. They were not just developing stories, they were developing writers. And now they don't. They expect you to go develop on your own, whether it's as a writer or a filmmaker, and then eventually perhaps you'll get paid for it. But it's all outside the system now. So that's something that's sorely missed, because they used to invest a lot more in scripts and their own IPs instead of chasing someone else's IP to try and turn into a blockbuster.
I unmute myself.
Yeah, there you go.
Your lips were moving, but
So Kay is in a car, having just spent the day on set filming. So Kay, like, what got you into filmmaking and wanting to be on sets and actually not just write, but go over and do the actual production?
And let me point out, it seems to be a little unusual to me that a writer is on set. So Kay, what position are you doing in the production? Like, is this multifaceted? Like, why is a writer on set right now? And tell us a little bit about that.
Right. Well, I think this is kind of one of my hard truths that I think that, I mean, do we get to like, everybody like take a drink every time we say hard truth and then we list one? Which is, I think in the indie world, yeah. There you go. Okay, hard truth, everybody. I think when you are an independent or a DIY filmmaker, I think that you end up, I will take off my mask as soon as I get on my Uber, but I can't do it. Sorry, somebody asked that question. I can't do it legally until I get out. Sorry, guys. I will try to speak loudly though. So as a DIY filmmaker, I think a lot of times we have to wear many hats, where you write something and you love your project, but much like Doug was kind of talking about, there's not necessarily a network to champion your project right away until you have a brand. So a lot of times you end up doing a lot of your own starter work, I think, in this era to jumpstart your work in your brand. And so I actually do a lot of work on set helping friends, and then they help me on my projects as well. So I actually was on set today as a first AD and basically doing some producer work as well. So I do write and produce mainly because in the producer mindset, I want to, push forward some of the things I'm writing. Oftentimes, I get a lot of people who are like, this stuff is good, I like it, but I don't know anybody who can make it. So I decided to be the person who can make it. And I think it's kind of doing that for yourself.
And I'd love to.
Can we dispel a myth here about the writers not being on sets?
Yeah,
That's a myth.
That is a myth.
That's a
That is
myth.
a myth.
It is very rare when there aren't writers available or on set, especially in television, by the way. There's definitely a writer on the set in TV at all times. But even in features, there's one, if they're not there on the set, they're on the phone, pretty close by.
It's so helpful because if you are a writer that is really flexible on set and they're useful, you can do stuff like, hey, we had to change the blocking of this location, or we found this really great prop. Can we angle the scene in this direction? And a writer, oftentimes, if you leave it to them to improv, even a great improvisationalist might forget the important beat that is getting rewritten, or it's always helpful to put your brain in and help them rewrite it and things like that. So it's always good to kind of be there, help them with lines, help kind of improv if there's something that needs to change day of, or just in general, I think it's good morale. A lot of people, every time I'm on set, is like they want to talk about the script, they want to talk about the thing that got them excited for the project.
So are you, as a writer, are you on set, with your laptop open, in an improv session? Are you having to kind of take down the conversation? Are you having to almost rewrite the script real time?
More rewriting on the fly.
Yeah.
And then often if you're rewriting on the fly and somebody's coming up with lines, you kind of need to record them so you can have the for consistency. So let's say somebody didn't like one line, or a line, we found a better line in there. It's good to, revise the pages or revise the scene as you go. So especially for editing and stuff, because a poor editor will look at that and go, this is great, but it's not in my script. I don't know where it takes place.
Right.
So things like that, if you can give them those instructions as you go, it makes everybody's life easier. And I'm sure Doug has his own experience as well.
I think we all do, but just to get back to this, it's not really those who perpetrate the myth of writers not being on set are directors, because directors generally would prefer the writer not to be on the set, and there's a few reasons for that. One, because the director likes to think of themselves as an auteur. They really didn't, except for present company excluded, clearly. But there's a practical reason as well that directors don't handle very well, which just has to do with cast. And actors have a tendency to migrate towards the person who wrote the words or wrote the character, to ask them questions and stuff like that. And directors feel like that could end up being some form of subterfuge, or the actors showing a lack of trust in them, etc. The other reasons why actors will seek out a writer also is because directors are in the middle of chaos all the time, and they've got a zillion people asking them questions, and the writer is maybe sitting over there with his laptop or with his headphones on listening to something, and the writer's available, so, but and that's a sticky thing to deal with directors, but there's always a writer who ends up there somehow.
So Pratna, I'm curious about you because for many reasons, but you grew up in India and then you came over here, and the experience of coming over and breaking into filmmaking, and where did you live in California? Did you live somewhere else? Like, what was that whole breaking in experience for you?
Sure. So yeah, so I was born and raised in India, and I came to the US for grad school. I went to Chapman. That's where I met Kay. I actually come from a film family in India. My grandfather was a music composer in the south of India, so he's made over 2,000 films. But his heyday was a little after I was born. So I got to see, experience his music and really learn about my grandfather as an artist through his fans and going to concerts or just walking with him on the road and people like flocking him and really seeing sort of the transformative like effect that, cinema and music has in people's lives. So I always sort of like thought that was super cool and was very intrigued and interested in it. And I wanted to find there isn't a lot of really structured film education in India. And I did try to learn on set. I spent some time working with filmmakers there. But it's very chaotic. There's no like, everybody does everything and also nobody's doing anything. It's kind of wild over there, at least back in the day. When I was there. So I was like, okay, I want to find the longest film program I can, go as far away and figure this out on my own. Because obviously I want to make things extremely hard for myself, because I think if I stayed in India, I may have managed to break into the industry a long time ago.
Would it have been easier for you
way easier
to stay there?
100%.
It would. Oh, wow.
But I have always tried to do things that are unnecessarily difficult. Oh, we lost Kay. Hopefully she comes back.
Taking herself off screen because maybe she's hopping on.
Okay, hopefully she'll.
I'm getting out of set car. I'll see you in a moment.
All right, Kay. So I came out here to Chapman. I came into the program as a director. I've always enjoyed writing, but learning, writing screenplays is a whole other beast. And I think I learned a lot from obviously my program, but also working with Kay. We worked very closely all through Chapman. We did our first short together. We co-wrote The Miseducation of Bindu over several years. So I really sort of learned with, through working with her, and I have directed things I have written, and I've directed things that other writers have written, and I've just come in as a director. And I think they're both very different experiences. And I think to an extent, I do agree with Doug about having writers on set. I have always had the writer on set. The last project, there are, because she's a WGA writer, she was there for a week. We were doing, but she was very open to being there and workshopping some of the scenes that maybe were not working, and punching up some jokes and things like that. So for me, it really comes down to what is my relationship with the writer, and I spend a lot of time talking to them and trying to make sure that I am communicating their vision, as much as it is also where I am taking the story, and how I see it. So I'm pretty comfortable having writers on set so far. I've only made 3 features, so we'll know. There'll be time maybe when I'm like, what is happening? But for now, I've always found it to be very helpful. And even through the pre-production process, like I like to make sure that I've made a connection with the writers, so that while I'm going through the process, I can shoot them an email or a text and just be like, hey, I'm thinking this and this and this. Does what are your thoughts? I like to be as collaborative as I can be, because I know that it's only going to make the project better. So I'm pretty open to collaborating with folks and stuff like that. So I've had a great relationship with Kay, and I hope I'll continue to have with other writers as well.
That's what I was going to mention. No. I was going to say it's really cool how you and Kay kind of took your relationship from Chapman, into so much of your work. I mean, like I want you to speak about that a little bit, of like just the value of finding that, that counterpart, or that person, that creative that you can like really kind of, hold on to and go into your work. Do you find that relationship has just really benefited you on the long run?
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, 100%. The first feature that Kay and I did together, Kay wrote it. My husband, who's a cinematographer, actually produced it because he was sick of waiting for us to try to make it. He was like, let's just do this. So he did all the hard stuff. He raised money and talked to people, stuff that, DPs don't really want to do. My best friend, who also went with us to Chapman, was our DP, and he shot the short that the movie's based on. So I was like, he had to shoot it. There was no way anyone else could. The editor was also a really good friend of ours from Chapman. Our gaffer was, so it was very much a community of people that we sort of went to school with and are our friends. And it was truly a really amazing and wonderful experience. But I've also been, now making movies with people I don't know until I'm dropped into like pre-production, in some either like Arkansas or Chicago or wherever, and you just meet a bunch of strangers and you figure it out, and you end up they become family too, and you want to work with them, continue building those relationships as well. So finding your film family is huge, because they are going to be your ride or die. They're going to show up for you. They're going to care about the projects, because they're involved with it as well. And I feel like it helps you all rise together as well. So as you get more gigs, you can bring more people in.
Yeah.
All around.
So you touched on your husband saying, I'll produce this. So we've all been producers, I myself included, raising money. It's not easy at all. And somebody actually has asked us a question about that, saying, you're a badass for taking the time to do this. That was to Kay. But you know what? I would argue that you're all badasses. And this person was saying that it seems like they might be forced to produce and maybe even direct their own writing in order to get anything made. How did you start making your own work, and how did you find financing? So let's talk about like financing, because I'm sure Doug produced the Mooseport one, Welcome to Mooseport, and that was more of a major production, having to raise like big old money. And then there's
don't ask me any questions about raising money, because I've tried and I've failed, and I don't know how to do it. And I actually know how it's done, but I don't seem to have the acumen. So it's always an impressive feat for those who do it well and for the right projects.
Yeah. So Pradna, you've had to Kay's in Uberland. Pradna, like, can you talk about raising that money? I mean, like, is it like a crowdfunding thing that mostly your thing, your jam?
Yeah. So, I can definitely talk about, so making a first feature is hard enough, and then trying to raise money for it is probably like the hardest thing. And then trying to do that through crowdfunding and financing, a whole other beast. In fact, I think crowdfunding was probably the hardest thing in the pipeline of like, inception of idea to like completion, because asking people about like, hey, give me, 10, 15, $5, whatever. And basically you're just doing it because you want to see some folks go off and make a creative endeavor. And really there isn't that much in it for yourself, but you're trying to sell this idea that it's worth your while to care about this, is really hard if you're not good at asking people for stuff. And that was 100% Kay, my husband and myself and Danny and all of us who crowdfunded. We had seen some of our friends who had crowdfunded on other platforms, and we saw the ones that were successful and the ones that were not. And it kind of became this whole thing, which was like, we kind of followed like the NPR sort of, their member drives and stuff, where we raised some money ahead of time. We used that. We had some people who basically were like, we're going to give you some money to go off and make your movie. We used those people's, funding to do sort of matching funding drives and all kinds of things. We had clever giveaways. Because I was from India, India would wake up, at the nighttime in the US, and then during the daytime, Kay would crowdfund. So we were just on it for 30 days. It was nuts. It was very difficult. It was completely crazy. It was in India, the concept of crowdfunding does not exist. Plus, in India, if you ask people for money, everyone's calling my parents and like, is she okay? What is is she in trouble? And, trying to explain to them what crowdfunding was, and it was a lot. We had our hands full, but I think the thing that really helped with crowdfunding is that it creates a built-in audience. So even though there's always going to be the people who love us and are going to watch whatever we make, right? Those people exist. Welcome back, Kay.
Hey, Kay.
Thank you.
Nice to see you.
I was agreeing with Plot, and I agree with everything she said. So I felt like I was never gone. I was like, wow, she's talking for me. So yay.
Yay.
Anyway, I do have a face.
You do. It's great. Yeah, so that was the really, really great thing, was that it helped us build a following, and people who would donate to us would then share their project, and then more people would get on board. So by the end of the crowdfunding drive, we had over 4,000 people who were following our project, most of them who we did not know. So those were all people who then, continue to stay, interested in the project. So when it ended up going to festivals, if they either lived in the areas it played in or they had friends, they would then tell folks to go watch it. So we would meet people, at screenings who were like, oh yeah, we've been following your thing. And it was really, really kind of amazing. So I think crowdfunding is definitely a way to go. But again, the other really hard truth that we discovered in the process of making Bindu is that we made this movie for very little money. We raised what we think we could actually raise, which seemed impossible to us as a number because it was more than I'd ever made a movie for. And we budgeted the movie backwards, which is completely insane. But that's what you do when you have a bunch of like director, writer, creative people and no business brains, trying to run this operation. So we just made sure the film could function in that world, and that helped because we went back to Indiana, where my husband was from. So we got a lot of freebies, which helped and brought the budget down. But when we started going into distribution, there was literally a lot of people who would be like, this movie is made for too little. We don't want to touch it. And we were like, what? Like, I thought that's a good thing. Like, the chances you can make your money are higher that way. And they're like, yeah, you guys, you rookies, goodbye, And that was like eye-opening concept, because even while we were raising money, some people turned us down because they were like, you're raising too little. We don't want to get in. We don't want to invest. And I was like, what? But that means you have less, if whatever happens, like the amount of money you might lose or you might be out is a lot. And they're like, that's not how this works. Like, it's too little. And that was, again, a very eye-opening thing, and I don't think I would ever make a movie again where I raise money and go that route again, because it is very difficult. And you have to have such a strong end game to know that going that route is even doable, because it's hard. That is probably the hardest way I've ever made a movie. And it took Kay and I over 10 years to get that movie out. And I think, it was a great experience. Lots of wonderful things came from it, but it was hard.
Crowdfunding is brutal. Like I did it once, raised like $15,000 for a short film. You couldn't pay me to do it again. It was horrible. Like, ugh. And by the way,
multiple times, which is amazing.
Yeah.
And Kate wrote a great article for Pipeline Artist. I put it in the chat about, and I love the title. There's no crowdfunding fairy, and also Santa has diabetes.
That's basically another hard truth. So everybody go ahead and have
Santa has diabetes. It's the season for it. I love it. That's good.
Yes. Well, yeah, I enjoy crowdfunding, and I'm the weird one. Although I agree wholly with both of you. It's not necessarily a way to run a movie, like make a movie, but it is a way to kind of see like people are excited and support you. Because I think sometimes, and to get some of those like initial funds, because I think sometimes when you're like working and writing in your little void, you go, is anybody into this? Is anybody excited? And suddenly like you put it up there, and suddenly like people are like, I'll give you like $25 to, eventually see this movie one day, to have a digital copy of it and stuff. And suddenly you realize like, oh, like people are excited. Like there's a reason to keep going. But you know what though? I think what's interesting now is that this crowdfunding kind of has been here to stay in the film model for, oh goodness, I feel like almost a decade now. And especially for like short films and filmmakers. When Patna and I went to film school, which is longer than that, we're old. It didn't like, we knew that it was on the horizon, but like no one exactly knew what it looked like. And now crowdfunding is kind of such a norm for film and filmmakers and people writing their shorts or making calling cards and stuff, that the new thing on the horizon, I feel, is like WeFunder, which is now people are basically using the crowdfunding method, but they're getting investors for their film that way. They're finding people they wouldn't normally find, because a lot of times you find investors through references and stuff. And WeFunder is now becoming kind of a platform for kind of crowdfunding, but for equity and investors. And so I think that's like a new evolution, that it's hip it would be hip for all of us to become kind of more mindful of what's going on there, just because like Jim Cummings funded his last movie off of it, the beta test and things like that. So it's definitely useful, but anybody who wants to jump into that, I recommend crowdfunding first and getting your feet wet.
Yeah. I want to pop into some of the questions in the Q&A so we can make sure we get some of those. Somebody was asking about, this is now going back to the screenwriting side, like getting people, how hard it is to get people to read your scripts. And they have a literary agent reading one of theirs right now, but how do you, like, what is the best ways, like contest best way, and how to, any kind of networking tips? I know Pratna had some success with Nickel. You know, what are, and Kay with Script Pipeline, I mean, you know, what are your thoughts about getting, and Doug, the old one?
Thank you.
You
Nice descriptor.
Well,
You
I'm
could,
the old,
you're
I'm
gonna go
the
to
old
ancient
one
next?
too.
Is that?
I'm right there with you, buddy. So just like some ideas about getting, you know, networking, and like you guys mentioned, you met in film school. I know Doug went to USC. Like, you know, how important are those school networks that you've developed, and how do you did you get your first scripts read?
How do you get your first
Doug
scripts read? Yeah, how do you just start?
Doug had a great story that he told me years ago about his first agent and the book he made you read.
Oh yeah, back in the day. Yeah, I mean, my first agent, he wanted me to read the William Goldman book, Adventures in the Screen Trade, because he just wanted to know if I had the stomach for it. If I read the book and said, "Oh, this is exciting, let's do this. I can hardly wait." Great. If I read the book and got a little scared, you know, he was concerned that, you know, whether it was you know, I was going to be a good client or not. But back to getting your stuff read, it changes all the time, and then it doesn't change at all. It's getting read by as many people as often as you can, learning how to solicit feedback that's not BS, because most of what you're going to get is BS. And
that's a hard truth.
You know,
I feel like everybody takes a different home to that.
What's that?
I said that's a hard truth. A lot of notes you'll get back are BS. So everybody
most notes, yeah, if we go down that road, most notes you get back when you spent so much time, so much hard work pouring your soul into this written work, whatever it is. Most people know that because first of all, they can't imagine having written anything themselves, you know, right off the top. And so then when you present them with something to read, their whole, our as adults, pretty much, where we have taught ourselves, or society has taught us to be very polite. So people are really polite, and they're going to say the nice things about what you wrote. They're going to say, "I liked it." And, "Oh, I really loved it." And it's going to be baloney for the most part. And it's not constructive. It's very hard to get people, essentially to say to people, "I want you to read this thing that I wrote, and I spent all this time and blood on. And I really kind of in the inside want you to like it. But what I really need you to do is take a sledgehammer to it and see if it breaks, and where it breaks, and help me figure out why it's broken, and help me figure out what I need to do to get it fixed." And that's the part about getting read. And as your work gets better, and more, having more pop to it, or having more commerciality to it, or with a much stronger communication pipeline in it, you know, to whatever audience you're going to, it's going to get attention eventually, because there's a lot of people out there who are looking for good stuff because there's so little of it.
Like, gently, please break my work. I love it.
Yes, gently, please. I mean, they don't know it at the very beginning that they're asking you that, but after a while, you know, you get old. You'll get to use the old word, old and tough. But the sooner you can get a thick enough skin to learn how to really try and break the thing that you have spent so much time on, and to find out, you know, how to take that thing that's right now, it's running like it's on, use a car metaphor, it's running like it's on a two-stroke, you know, lawnmower engine and you want it to be full 8 cylinders, muscle car or whatever. You want it to be really, bulletproof in the end. And that takes time. It takes craft, and it takes draft after draft.
We're going to have to do a hard truth just about taking notes, like the
100%
taking notes, because it's Doug's given me plenty of notes in my time, and there is an art to it, and it's
like, how do you sift through the BS, and how do you find the notes that are really going to the ones that you want to take and really implement into your work? How can you determine one from the next? Like, what are some of your methods to that? I would love a hard truth on that.
Yeah.
So are we talking about another webinar, or do you want an answer to that?
Well, Doug hit us.
We've got a bunch.
I can quickly just say,
you need condensed version.
You need to obviously know what it is that you're writing and what you're trying to communicate in the first place. So it all starts with you, but then you have to learn how to give people permission to be mean or to be cruel, or and to solicit from them, hey, I think this character, even if it's BS, I think this character was a little bit, weak on this side, and I'm not so sure about that. I'm when you start showing some uncertainty to those people who you really want to get notes from, if they're not pros will just dump on you, and you'll get the real deal from them. But if you're trying to get, from anybody, solicit really constructive stuff, you need to find ways to give them permission to be critical of you. And the best way I've discovered to do that is to be critical myself first of the work. And they'll say, yeah, I got that kind of thought, that felt a little weak to me. And oh, by the way, it really got slow on page 45. And, or they may start volunteering. They realize you want constructive, advice, not that you want, to be stroked.
And actually 10 years ago was the very first time I had a conversation on the phone with Doug, and it was about notes, about getting honest feedback for an article I was writing for Script Magazine. I'm going to pop the link in there. But Kay, you were about to say something about notes or something else?
Yeah, well, first of all, I completely agree with Doug. And I think there's sometimes what has always helped. I mean, there's twofold. First, the question I get that started this all, which deserves some answers. Doug gave a good answer, but I'm going to chime in, is how do you get more reads? And obviously having a great script. The other thing is it's really when you first get in, you want to take your script to the person at the top and you want them to approve with you. And I think what a lot of people forget is that, the industry is, it's a constantly moving creature. The person that you're in a writing group right now who's an assistant, in town is one day going to maybe be their own, a junior agent or exec or something like that. And so, you should start working in the circles that you're already in. I found I got a lot of reads and a lot of people sticking up for me that were people from my old writing group in LA that had watched me work on scripts, saw how I worked, and were had also seen how I had given notes, and they're like, she's the real deal. I vouch for her because I've seen her not just on the page, which I like, but I know she can take notes. I know she can do that. Because a lot of times, as these other folks are moving up in their various jobs in town, they want to have a good recommend because that makes them look really good. And you've already kind of performed and shown that. So, a lot of people look up to get reads, but I also say look side to side because those people are going to be moving in the industry with you. And also, you can definitely get a lot of writer feedback and peer notes that way. And if you kind of come humble, like Doug is saying, I feel good about this scene, but I'm not feeling good about this scene yet. That kind of honesty is going to help you kind of probably find some more answers in your work instead of saying it's all perfect and good to go.
So, yeah.
Oh, that's excellent.
Yeah. Pradna, I want to ask you, skip over to something a little bit different. How did you get the distribution? Talk about distribution a little bit, and from the indie filmmaking aspect, and even your whole experience, but especially with getting Lionsgate involved in your last film.
Yeah, so for the first movie, The Miseducation of Bindu, we actually got distribution through my reps. So they sent it out to a whole bunch of different distributors, and we got bites from maybe a handful of them. Some of the deals were pretty sad. Some were good, but their strategy was maybe not in alignment. And then we partnered with Mar Vista because they honestly really, really believed in the film and loved it. And also didn't give us a deal that was kind of insulting, which is what a lot of them were like, what is this? Do you know what it took for us to make this movie? And it actually felt like worth our while. So we waited out a lot more than a lot of folks told us to. We were being advised heavily to maybe take a deal earlier to get the, but we were like, I believe there's somebody out there who cares as much about this as we do. And they've also sort of pushed it in that way, trying to find the right sort of streamer to get it out and all of that kind of stuff. So it's been pretty good. But again, distribution, a mysterious thing that we learned as a lot of what we did. So the thing that I really know how to do is make a movie. How to raise the money to make it and how to get it out in the world was a mystery, right? Because they don't really teach you that in film school. You just go off and make your stuff. So that was the stuff that we really learned the hard way. And we were very ambitious for our first go around. I think we benefited from having the Duplass brothers name attached. It helped open up some doors for us that normally would not have been, I think it was definitely a big part in like me getting representation and things like that, because they were like, okay, let's see what you got, because obviously somebody signed off on you, is generally the vibe, and I think that is general, it's generally how it goes. Somebody says this is worth your while, and then sometimes I wonder, even at film festivals, like, has anyone actually watched the movie? It just keeps like, somebody will email me from a festival and be like, hey, we heard you screened it and it was people really enjoyed it. Do you want to screen? I was like, anybody watching it to actually know what it is? It's like, you guys are all just telling each other, that it's good and it should be programmed. So we learned a lot of things like that, like how the sausage is really made is pretty much as bizarro as I always thought it would be, and still shrouded in a lot of mystery. The last two movies that I've made have been a completely different experience. I was hired to direct.
Was that terrifying?
No, amazing. This came from like complete, like insane, like, giving every ounce of my life to something, and then you just get hired to go direct something and you do what you do and then you bounce, and then they tell you what's happening with the movie and you're like, that's fantastic, and that's been really cool. And I miss making things that I write, so obviously I'm still going to pursue that, but I want to direct, and that's what I want to do. So I have been, I read material, I see what I connect to, and then I go off and either sometimes I have to pitch, or other times they're like, yeah, we like you, come do it, and that's all been very eye-opening, and it's been awesome and humbling. But yeah, with Lionsgate and everything, we made the movie, and the folks at Lionsgate watched a cut. They really liked it. They took it. They said they were going to buy it. So I just hear from, the reps at the, studio what's happening. And then they're like, this is where it's going. That's where it's going. And then I'm told that it's going to be out, in December 17th. And we do some PR and press, and it's in the world, And it wasn't any less work. I mean, I worked extremely hard to get that movie made, but I didn't have to do all the stuff afterwards, I have no say, control, or knowledge. I'm just informed of what's happening, which is both fascinating and also weirdly isolating. You put so much of yourself into it, and then it's someone else's baby, and you just say goodbye, and then hope it lands somewhere, so it's very different.
So Doug, somebody's asking about what is the thing that gets something picked up by the studios?
Well, that's wouldn't I like to know?
And, and I'm not sure if they mean like, I'm not sure if they mean your screenplay being chosen by a studio, or like Pratna's experience with the film being made and something like Lionsgate.
Well, Pratna's experience is a little more practical, because when the film's made, it's a lot, it's finished. There it is. We made the movie. A distributor can look at it and say, we like that. We'll pay X dollars for it and whatever, and we'll distribute it because it's a finished project or product. A screenplay is kind of like, it's more than an idea and less than a movie.
Right.
So they're making bets on it more so than seeing the finished deal. And what studios are looking for, it keeps changing and has been changing. The sands are always shifting. And if you try and second guess it, you're going to probably end up, a year behind the curve. But what they're looking for is, I think I used the term bulletproof earlier. When they get the script now, they want it to be ready. They want to say, oh my gosh, I can take this to my boss. I can take this to my client. I can take this to my, that movie star I manage. If a manager gets it, he wants to know that it's the movie star is going to do it and that the studio is going to pay him $20 million to be in it. I mean, it ticks off these boxes for them at that moment because the studios are in the game presently of making big movies. They don't make small movies. They distribute small movies. They're definitely in the business of taking a smaller movie and putting it in their pipeline and selling it. But right now they're in the business of big movies. So, I mean, right now studios want IP. Unless you have an IP or something that looks like it's going to be a repeatable thing, then yeah, if it's not going to be a sequel, they don't want to be involved. That's the studio business. So when it comes to a script, they want to see something that's going to be commercial, that's going to attract talent at the time, that's going to, maybe it's going to one day, I mean, hopefully maybe after December 18th, it'll be one of those things that say, oh, we'll get Pratha to do it. She'll jump in if we can get her to say yes, because with her comes Kay or comes whatever's attached to that film family she's talking about. That may be something. I mean, presently what they're looking for, diversity, huge word, in the whole, because they're all the studios are now part of these multi-level corporations, and corporations want to please the public. They don't want anyone mad at them. So right now they're looking for a lot of diversity, and I think they're looking for big ideas. I had one exec not long ago say to me, and this is, I don't think it's true, by the way, but at least this is his perspective. I've got over here, I've got 1,000 screenwriters with the talent to tell a story. I've got over here this empty vessel of really great ideas. So they want that really, really great idea, and not, because they think there's a lot of great writers. I'm not sure that's true. I think they really need that vessel, that great idea already married with a great writer, or they won't know it's a great idea, when they read it. So, you got to find, you got to find some way to stand out.
Yeah.
And that would be my biggest answer. Come up with a way to stand out that sticks.
Hey, I noticed you had said you were going to answer this one live, so I'm just going to give it to you. Have any of you guys worked with any kinds of fiscal sponsorship companies like From the Heart Productions, and what was your experience? Did you?
Yeah.
To say you'd answer
I
that?
did. I have. Yeah, I've had some crowdfunding campaigns. I've actually used literally From the Heart, but Film Independent does fiscal sponsorship. Many nonprofits that are part of the film community will offer fiscal sponsorship, and basically they'll take a small percentage that goes towards their nonprofit, and then they'll also handle your, the finances. And people who donate to the film, like a crowdfunding film, let's say someone donates to your film on Seed and Spark and your fiscal sponsorship, they will issue them, because it's a nonprofit, a tax write-off for their donation at the end of the year. So if you have people who are interested in tax write-offs and things like that, it's very good. The other reason, and the reason that I've done it as well, is if you apply for grants, let's say you're a documentary person, lots of those people apply for grants year round, or there's plenty of other grants for narrative, a grant is often has to be issued to somebody with fiscal sponsorship, and they will issue you the money. They rarely give it to just an individual. So if you're going to be applying for grants, you should probably be looking for that. That's not every grant, but I know, for example, I want to say this CA is California Arts Council.gov, for example. You have to have a fiscal sponsor, and several others that are like more dollars. Usually, the higher the amount goes, that can really be required. And really, what it is basically you're hiring the nonprofit to be your accountant on where the money goes. And so they want to, let's say you get a grant, they want to be able to track what the money was used for and that it was used for the film. And if you can show them that, that's great. And also you can get people a tax deduction if they're donating, because you're basically like a film charity for the moment. I really recommend it if you think you're going to go the grant route, or you think you're going to do some crowdfunding and that's an incentive. I've done some crowdfunding campaigns where it wasn't an incentive and where it was. I found having them as an incentive is nice, especially if you're doing something near the end of the year and people are starting to think about their taxes and they go, oh, well, I'm going to pay that money anyway. I might as well give it to a film project and then have that deduction in their taxes. But again, it depends also on how big the project is. If you're doing a small project where you're raising just a few $1,000s, it may not be worth the percentage you give to your fiscal sponsor. This will take like about 5 to 6%.
Awesome.
Okay. I'm glad I
Jeannie,
knew
your
that
lips
one.
are moving, but we can't hear you.
I know this thing came up. You're muted. Somebody's asking
Jeannie's
about
in a foreign film. We need
there's just, like,
subtitles.
subtitles down there. So somebody's asking about the pandemic and platforms like YouTube and Patreon and how they might have changed the landscape of filmmaking. Like, you know, do you think any of these things that where they're making, you know, filmmaking during the pandemic are going to translate over, you know, maybe some great things that have actually come out of it, or and also YouTube and Patreon and maybe things that has changed the landscape for filmmaking?
I think the pandemic's changed the movie going landscape enormously. Even though I think what it really did, I think it pushed it, it just hurried it along. It's kind of where it was going anyway, to streaming and a lot of different platforms and great democratizing with the availability of so many platforms versus at one time there were just 5 major studios and maybe a couple other distributors if you wanted your film released and showed up at a movie house. Now that most everything is about streaming into your home, it makes it a lot easier for other companies to step up, big and small, to give your movie a chance, which I think is awesome.
Nice.
I wholly agree with that. It is amazing how many filmmakers I run into, and they're like, "Oh, we're on Arrow, we're on what is the one, Shutterbox, the horror one." Like, there's just so many different apps now that can, you know, grab different niche audience members and groups. It's fantastic. Sometimes, I mean, the only thing is sometimes it seems like there's a lot. So, you know, you do see that kind of competition, and some make it, some don't. Quibi died its death due to, they blame the pandemic. But I think I think it had more to do with their business model, but you know, that's something to look at. I think on the filmmaking side of things, everybody, you know, there was a huge flux of projects, which is just like, how can we do pandemic friendly projects? You know, how can we make, and, you know, if for the indie filmmaker, like, they were like, well, we've always been trying to get like just only 2 people in a room and make it an interesting film. So some of them just kind of flourished. And I know like Mark Duplass did one, which was called like Spanish lessons during it, which was like, they were both over Zoom. And so there was some people kind of, I think, went back to basics and said, like, how can I make some simple things good? And I always think that's a really good lesson for like us as filmmakers and writers. It's kind of like cooking. Like someone once told me for cooking, and I feel it's the same way for writing and filmmaking, which is, a good cook might use, 7 ingredients. A great cook may figure out how to make it great with 3. Like you start to learn that you need less, or you learn that you can pull something off with only 3, something amazing off and only need 3 ingredients to get that wow factor. So sometimes working with less will kind of help you, find more of your art within the minimalism. Not every project can go that way, but I think in the pandemic, it was kind of a return to that kind of idea space for a lot of filmmakers.
Mm-hmm. I like that. That's a good answer. I feel like whenever you're kind of put into a tunnel, like the pandemic did with a lot of creators, you have to create within your space, and for whatever reason that focuses you in and allows you maybe to get to the nitty and gritty of it in a lot of ways. And I like what it produced out of the creators. Like I know for Pipeline specifically, we just experienced like a massive boom of creativity of screenwriters who were literally just locked in their living rooms, and the submissions just went, quadrupled. And I was just so excited to see that when you lock a creator in a cage, they create, and it's hopefully that doesn't, happen again for a long period of time.
I was going to say, are we getting locked in cages?
Let's just not do
now?
that again. That was a good 2-year experiment, and we got a lot of great content out of it, hopefully for years to come. But and I thought this was an interesting question that popped up here, but it says, which do you feel is more important? Creating a project you feel is worth pursuing, or finding potential collaborators? What should you do first? I feel like it's kind of like a little bit of both. Like you kind of do simultaneous here,
depends on what you need,
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
and I mean, some people can't write without another person in the room.
Yeah.
Some people can't produce without having another producer. Some people can't, some directors can't direct without their writer being with them, or without that actor that they know doesn't need any direction. They just need to just say action, and it's going to come out. So, I mean, those collaborations come along, but I will say, as a writer, that's the best thing about filmmaking, especially someone who writes both movies and books. There's a purity to writing books, which is something I love and I adore, but there's nothing like collaborating on a movie when a lot of people come together and it turns out, it's, and it's like crack. You just want to do it again. As soon as you've been through the war, you want to go back and have one more with these same people, because they're so good to be in that bunker with.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Speaking of collaboration, somebody else was asking about, how there's like these 2 things that are really important. They're probably both equally important, like about being the writer who you're selling yourself, being the person who, or filmmaker, director, like I want to work with that person because they have a great personality, good work ethic, all of that kind of stuff, balancing that with their actual talent. Like, does being a better person weigh more, or the talent weigh more? Like what is that nice little, I mean, obviously you need to have both, but maybe speak about being that person people want to work with.
I think it's like any job interview, isn't it? I mean, it's half of, I mean, Jeannie and I both have sons who are roughly the same age and just left college and are out there in the job market. And at least when they were out there, and they were first time interviewing, and, their resumes are one thing, but at the end of the day, they still want to find out if you're someone who they can hang out with and spend hours upon hours with, sharing a project with and work. And a movie's just 10 times that, especially production. It's like everyone gets on a submarine and goes down to 2,000 fathoms, for 12, 15, 18 hours. And you get a couple of breaths of air to sleep and you go do it again. So hopefully those collaborations are, you really like being in that place together. Occasionally there's, and I'm dominating here, so forgive me, because, but one of my favorite stories, some of those collaborations are built on some sort of conflict. You know, why did Kevin Reynolds and Kevin Costner have fights that blew up every movie that they were at the end of every, and then 6 months later they're back together working on something again? So there's also something in the agitation with the other. It's Keith Richards and Mick Jagger, you know. There's, you know, and I'm sure there's, you know, writers that directors are annoyed by but love their work, and vice versa.
And Pradna, I'd be curious to see your take on that, because not only are you hired to do stuff, but you're also bringing people on your set. Talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that serves me best is that I am very open and I love to collaborate. There is no idea that nobody on set is not allowed to bring to me. Like I'm always talking to everybody. I want everybody on set to feel like they're engaged with what's happening, because especially like folks like PAs and stuff who are like outside the eye of the storm, like they do so much work to keep the ship afloat. Like I want to do everything I can to like keep them engaged and make sure that they want to stick around in this industry and not have like the worst experience and never want to be there again. Again, I do that within my capacity because of course I'm directing a movie and managing personalities and all kinds of other crazy, insane things that are happening on a daily basis. I try to have a positive set. I think that's really important. For me, everything sort of happens in that initial stage, especially the last two movies. I didn't know a single soul on those sets. Many of them worked together for a long time, and then I just got popped in. Having made movies with my friends, you know, there was a level of anxiety of like what this is going to be, you know. Am I going to sink or swim? Like, am I going to be able to get these people through this, you know, whatever it is that we have to create and make? And I think, I mean, the experiences were great, and I, you know, found new folks that I would love to continue working with. And I think there's going to be another one with some of the people that I just worked with. And I think, I mean, my approach is be fair, be honest, be open. I'm happy to let people in as much as they want to be, and I can manage, right? Because at the end of the day, I got to also keep things moving. And I think that's
how much of your decision-making process, especially I'm curious about like your next movie that you're gonna make, whatever comes to you next, you're looking at the keys that you're gonna have to hire. And you're gonna say, okay, I worked with him, I worked with her, I know what they bring to the party. There's a comfort zone and a shorthand, and I know I'm not gonna have to manage that situation versus, oh my God, I could work with that cameraman and I love what he or she did in that last thing, and maybe they could bring that thing to me, but it's also outside your comfort zone.
Yeah, I am open to working with folks that I've never worked with before. For me, it is, do I get along with them as a human being, you know? So the first time we meet, that is huge. And of course, you don't get to really know the person, but I think, you know, I feel like I'm a pretty fairly good judge of like, what are the red flags? Like, is this feeling weird or is this feeling, you know, comfortable? And that is especially true for me with the cinematographer, because I feel like I need to open my head and then like download everything and feel like it's a safe space, you know, to sort of have that interaction with a complete stranger. And having worked with my best friend for like 5 projects and then having to work with new people recently, I've actually found that very refreshing in some ways, because there was such a shorthand with me and my friend and I for so long. It was actually very interesting to see how other people reacted to the way that like I thought, or my ideas, or the way I kind of communicate like visual stuff, and seeing how that gets translated and put through someone else's head, you know, and how it comes out has been very fascinating to sort of see. But I think for me, whatever next project, 100%, it'll have I mean, obviously it is the project. I think I've said no to more things than I'm saying yes to right now, because that's
Congratulations.
yeah, the
Yeah.
stories
Like
are
to be-
not, the stories are, yeah, and it's shocking to have to, every time I do it, I'm just like, what am I doing? I'm never gonna work again.
Hard
Um,
truth.
Yeah, it's like,
But by the way, that's another hard truth.
yeah,
That's
it's
how
like,
what everyone who's succeeding in this game is thinking at one
Yeah.
moment or another, that, you know, I'm never going to work after this, you know, because it's a feeling of the ground underneath you not being solid.
Yeah.
And from that is
Yeah.
where a lot of work comes from.
yeah, and it's also a skill to say no, you know, because the people bringing you stuff are people that have either worked with you and have something, and they're like, you are the first person we're asking, right? And they expect that you're going to say yes. And I don't know, I would have said yes probably, but I feel like bet on myself that I can say no to some things now. And I am. And it's also the art of saying no. You know, the art of saying no is to say, you know, it's like a kiss with a slap, or a slap with a kiss, or whatever they call it. You know, it's like saying no, but keeping the door open so that they want to bring you other stuff, you know? And that's kind of where I am. And I feel like I want to put story first. I want to make sure that the story comes with a budget that actually does justice for this film. And then 2, there's days, because my last feature I did in 16 days, which was the biggest budget I'd ever worked with, but it was still not enough to tell the story that needed to be told, you know? And the script deserved a lot more than what we wish we could have done. And, you know, those are the kind of things that I want to be mindful of. And speaking to the, you know, producers and the studios, and bringing that across without seeming, you know, whatever, you know, and keeping that door still open, so they'll think of me for other stuff. So that is my big thing now, is finding things that I really want to give up everything for about 6 months of my life, because that's what it is. I have to forget everybody and just go into a wormhole. And I want to do things that like get me super jazzed.
Need to get you on bigger movies, because then it's going to be a year of your life, and then a year and a half of your life, and then maybe it's a Marvel movie and it's 3 years of your life. And no, not a Marvel movie. I'm just
Don't do
only,
that to her, Doug. Don't
only
do
if
that
you
to
want
her.
it. Only if you
Yeah, I'll
want
do a
it.
Marvel movie.
Before we keep
It's like,
going,
hell
Renee,
yeah, I'll do whatever.
before
Chloe
we
Zhao did one, and I believe that it's possible.
Before we keep going with any questions, if any of you guys need to take a 5-minute break, or are you good?
I'm good.
You all good?
I'm good. I think
Okay.
Patna just took a break. I had to go off to, you know, plug in the iPad. So
Oh, that's
I'm
fine. That's
good.
fine.
I got
Okay,
charged.
cool.
Yeah.
So there's a couple questions about how do you figure out how much money it costs to make your film? And one of them also added that they've got a script for a TV comedy pilot, and they could film the first half, which stops at an exciting point. How much would filming the first half or the entire script cost, and what outlets are best to show it? Obviously, the cost depends on the script and the locations and all that kind of stuff. But if you could speak a little bit about that line producer role when you're figuring out how much does this film cost?
Right.
Who wants to
Question
take
for
that one?
Kay.
Oh, awesome.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, so it really depends. There's a couple of books on the matter. If you ask a lot of folks, first you have to figure out how many days you're going to need to shoot, and then then you can budget from there. You can't necessarily, so you need to know how long you're going to hire these folks for. If you're talking about half of a sitcom, that's what, 15, 16 pages. That's the equivalent of a short film, depending on how many locations and stuff. You might be able to do it in 2, 3, maybe 4 days, somewhere around there. If you're doing it on the indie nuts and bolts level, if you're doing scenes that have martial arts or stunts, your pages are going to go a lot slower because you're going to have to stop and do all that stuff. So it really depends on the content. And then realistically, though, considering all the time it takes to get the permits, buy the insurance, get everybody out there, I would be hard pressed to find out why you wouldn't just film the whole thing and wait a little bit longer, because there's a lot of film festivals that will do a pilot category, and there's even like a Tribeca has a marketplace for like pilots and things like that. They don't have a marketplace for half a pilot. And so my big fear is you want something that's kind of completed, that people can see that you can do the full episode. If you show them just a little part of it, they don't know that you can land it. You have something really exciting, but they don't know that you can, button up that episode. That's why like a lot of times like a short film will be made before, like classically, like Whiplash was a short film to prove they could make the feature. Sling Blade was a short film, and then became a feature. But the short film itself, or the short unit of story, was a complete story. And so even if the feature film or the TV pilot never got made, you could take it around, show people, and go, oh, that was a story. So if you're going to do only 15 pages or half your episode, it has to be, in some sense, I think, complete for it to be very useful. And I would say,
I
what do you guys
agree with
think?
that, but also imagine being the danger you put yourself in as well, of going to all the work and all the trouble of shooting half an episode, and your response from everyone is, wow, that was a really good half an episode. Show me the rest.
Right. And then you got to do it all over again. So just logistically speaking, I would say you'll probably save more money doing the full episode altogether. Because if not, you got to get everybody back together. You got to get the permits, the insurance, and do it all over again. And it's so much easier just to add 3 more days and finish the episode.
Kate, to tack on to what you were talking about, you jumped into short films a little bit. We had a question that says, at what point does making shorts become a non-fruitful endeavor, according to you? Like, just curious on that front.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the world of the short film, you can make money off of a short film. A lot of documentary features make money off of a short film, especially if it goes for like education purposes and things like that. Sometimes people will just make a little mini doc, like the guy who made like the history of Sriracha did like a 20-minute doc on it, and it was its own unit that he could, sell, and people could buy on like Vimeo and stuff and learn about how Sriracha is made. A lot of fictional stuff doesn't necessarily find a place in the market that's very short form, unless like a streaming app is something that's going to pick it up. So most people, kind of like the joke is, you don't really make shorts necessarily to make money. Not narrative shorts. You do that to kind of show what you can do. They often are calling cards either of a bigger project to show like, hey, I'm a director. This is a short I did and I pulled off and it looks great. Now I can handle something bigger. So a lot of times people make shorts just to kind of, this is me doing this skill set, or a genre I'm interested in, or this is a smaller version of a concept I want to explore. It doesn't even have to be the exact same story, but maybe it's, oh, I do horror and here's like a mini horror, and then here's the, a larger horror I want to do in that vein. And so usually if you got to know what you want to do with your short film, because the answer of making money off of it and being like a financially stable short filmmaker isn't really a thing.
Hard truth. Hashtag hard truth.
Take a drink.
Yeah,
Hard truth.
just to add to what Kay said. Kay, are you done? Sorry.
Oh yeah, well I was gonna say
Yeah.
an example of I
Go
don't
ahead.
know, you know him. My friend Henry. Yeah, he also, I think he won Script Pipeline as well. And actually I think he recommended Script Pipeline. He's like, why have you never worked with these people? And I was like,
Oh, Henry.
what? Yeah, it's Script Pipeline. But anyway, I produced his short film because he wanted to prove that he could be a writer director, and nobody was going to hire him sight unseen to be a writer director because no one had seen him be a writer, no one had seen him be a director. So nobody wants to hire somebody with no proof that they can pull it off. So the first thing he did was basically put down his money to make a short film. The short film was a success. It wound up on Short of the Week. I was a lot like me being in New York right now, it's just like sleepless nights getting it done. And then he's one of the rare few, got to make his feature film and direct it, the next project. They liked that feature script. It was in the same vein of the type of short he did. And they're like, we see this guy can do it, pull it off. People like it. And I think his movie screened at TIFF in 2019 or 18. So it is a thing you can do, but the short is usually just to kind of show that what you can do.
Right.
Go ahead. I didn't mean to talk over you. Go ahead.
No, I agree with everything you said. Absolutely accurate. I think it depends on, I think as a writer, it is really good to see your work produced and having that experience, because you learn so much as a writer from seeing it being produced. And then if you're part of that and learning the nuts and bolts, it's just great. And I've really enjoyed seeing Kay, branch out and do all these other roles like producing and editing and all of these things. And I think it only makes you a better writer, because you sort of understand all these other things that are also super helpful in storytelling and are part of the process. For directing, and this is my opinion, and I really believe in this, is if you want to be a director, it's great to direct shorts. Yes, do them, low risk, just learn your process, the skill, the art of directing, whatever. But to really make an impact, because not everybody gets to be Henry. Henry is a one-off, and it does happen. There are Henrys in the world who make their first short and then are directing a feature like 3 months later. If you want to get your foot in the door, you have to direct a feature, however hard it is, even if you have to crowdfund it. Write something amazing. It has to be a good story, because that's, especially if it's low budget, people have to care about it. And then go off and do it, because it really changes the doors that open for you after you make your first feature. Because folks are like, okay, here you were able to tell a story from the beginning to end, and it was compelling, and I didn't turn the screen, TV off or whatever. I think that really changes your ability to do other projects. Of course, there's a lot of other things that go on. You have to be out there and network, and it has to get seen, all of that other crazy things. But features are, I think, a bigger calling card for you than shorts. That comes if you want to be a director. Just my opinion.
Well, I mean, just completing a feature, I mean, it goes to show what kind of creative you are, you're making a large statement whenever you can actually complete a feature from start to finish, and like you said, and demonstrate that skill set, because there's not a lot of directors, you're going to put their money where their mouth is on that front. You can call yourself a director all day long, but it's a visual skill set, it's a visual medium, and you gotta demonstrate that. So 100%. I 100% agree with that.
It changed things for me significantly, and I always wonder, why did I wait so long? Because it's so hard to do, to just basically will it into existence. With the help of lots of people. But once I did that, it really did open up some doors that I didn't know were available to me until then.
Yeah. Awesome.
And because the cost is so extraordinary oftentimes when it comes to distributing features and let alone to make them, it's such a risk averse place. The filmmaking, I mean, the indie and inside baseball world, that they really don't want to see anything but you having done it before, and they want to, and then they're going to ask you to do it over and over again. And you got to break out of that into something new. But, if you made a feature on your iPhone that was compelling, I think people would find it way more comfortable to hire you to direct a movie of their film than if you did a short.
I feel like you guys just answered a lot of questions regarding short films in here. So
I mean, they're really good to learn the craft.
And I also think when I wrote and produced my short film, I only did one because I realized I don't really want to be a filmmaker. It answered that question. And I think that's also an important thing to do.
It's a question for you. Yeah.
Right. I realized it was really exhilarating and exciting. And I cried the first scene that I heard somebody saying the words that I wrote. But I also learned that you do not need as much dialogue as you think you need.
There you go.
Like, trust the actor, trust them that they can what they can convey with a look, with, you know, whatnot. You really don't need as much dialogue as you think. Therefore, I think it is really cool for everyone who's a screenwriter, whether you want to be a director or not, or want to be a producer, when you learn how much money it costs to shoot this scene, it will forever change how you write, like forever. And so it is a good thing to do, like, even if you're not directing it,
the more you know about filmmaking, the better you are as a screenwriter, because you understand, you know, the limitations of the medium, and you know the questions you're also going to get, you know, in advance, that this might be an issue when when I'm writing something and I see any blocks of dialogue, I know I'm probably making a mistake, because, you know, once you've worked with an actor that cannot get their mouths around that many words in just in a few lines of dialogue, then you kind of realize, oh wait, there's other ways to do this, and it also makes for a better read.
Yeah.
And I'm just, as you're saying that about dialogue, Doug, I'm imagining what it was like for you the first time you heard the actor say, "Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker."
Well, unfortunately on that movie, I had to wait for the movie to be finished for me to see it, versus being there on the moment, you know, blah, blah, blah. So it's a great thrill.
What were you like the one who pinned the line? I thought that was improv.
No, that was Die Hard 1, and so it was all a matter of where it was going to go in Die Hard 2. It wasn't, you know, and then it was a matter of where it was going to go in Die Hard 3, and it was a matter of where it was going to go in Die Hard 4, and somewhere in there I stopped working on Die Hards. But it's like, oh, you know, that's what the studio wants to know, when you're gonna, when's the yippee-ki-yay gonna be in there?
It's the most important thing about those movies. Yeah.
And then you've got the head of the studio. Here's a hard truth: the head of the studio for the fourth one decides it's going to be a PG-13 Die Hard because he wants to advertise the movie during The Simpsons, and so you're saying, well, wait a minute, that I only have one yippee-ki-yay motherfucker. And has anyone met Bruce Willis before? Have you heard him talk? He can't, you know, there's an F word between every comma.
Right.
It's like they're like little bunnies that mate inside his mouth.
Have you met Bruce Willis? Having that conversation.
So
I love it.
So all yippee-ki-yays aside, and just one last thing about budgeting, because I want to just make sure I address this question that Tom has about when you're coming up with your budget, are you also factoring in marketing and production and film festival entry fees and all that kind of stuff? You're factoring all of that in, correct?
Yes, but never enough.
Yeah.
Because it costs a lot to finish your film.
Mm-hmm.
And who you're finishing your film for. Yeah. Each you know, distributor or whatever, everybody has different requirements. You know, one of the mistakes that we made with Bindu was when we finished the film, we output for festivals, which is, again, we learned the hard way, because when we finally had to finish the film for our distributor, everything had to be changed again because it was not to their specs, which meant we had to come up with a whole bunch of new money to throw at the film to finish it to their specs. So if you're making a feature, don't finish it for festivals. You're welcome.
There's never enough money.
So,
Ever.
Yeah.
and can we talk about post-production? Because I think a lot of people forget that. They think I've got it in the can, and there's still a whole bunch more.
Yes, you need so much more money. You got to save, you got to budget for like all of the finishing. So color, sound, if you need VFX, of course, you know, paying your editor, music, finding a composer. Are you going to use temp music? Are you going to go to, all kinds of questions need to be asked. Do you have music that you need to license? And then that is like a whole other, you know, thing that you got to go and deal with. It is a lot of money, it is a lot of time, and it's a lot of teeny tiny things that you need to keep track of that will all eventually come to, bite you in the butt, like it's 9 months later.
Well,
And
I think
say,
also,
as I'm
okay.
listening to all of you like talk about, there's this and then there's this and then there's this. It's
So
like
many things.
when you sit back, like when you're in it, it's one thing because you love it and you're passionate about it, whatever. But then sometimes when you sit back and you look at like everything that's involved, it's a miracle a film gets made. And do you ever sit there and say to yourself, what the hell am I
All day,
doing?
every time.
All day, every day.
It's daunting as F.
Yeah.
And so there's a little bit of bliss in the ignorance of it. You just have to want to climb the mountain. And once you've climbed one mountain, you realize you can climb another after that. But
the other one is just a little bit higher and harder. And there's like,
but it's, you realize it does eventually get done somehow.
Mm-hmm.
It does get done. It does get done.
Don't let the overwhelming, daunting element of it keep you from trying.
100%. And I think the thing that making movies really has taught me is how much I can put myself through and still drop anything and everything if someone is like, let's go make a movie. Like, I will do it any day. Like, and in the middle of it, I'm like, why did I do this to myself? This is completely batshit crazy. But when I'm not on set, I love being on set. That is like my most happy place. Like, the worst things could be happening, but there's just like sound in my head, even though it's just like hell on earth sometimes. Post-production is hard because it's lonely sometimes, and you're just confronted with all the shit you did wrong. Sorry, are you allowed to cuss here? Whatever, it's too late.
We were saying,
we opened that.
Oh yeah,
well,
of course we can.
Jeannie already blew
opened
that
that
over.
back.
Blame you.
I apologize.
Too late for
And
that.
it is. They're like little bunnies that mate once they start.
I like it.
You unleash the bunnies.
So when you're shooting and you got it in the can and then you're gonna do post, like how long do you like to just let it kind of sit for a second before you jump right in? I mean, like, I'm looking at Kay, she's gonna be coming off this shoot, just like, I need to sleep.
Sleeping tomorrow, right, Kay?
Yeah, sleep is for tomorrow. Tomorrow is a sleep day. I think honestly, most people I know rest for like maybe a week or 2 weeks, and then they get into it. It's good to give yourself a little rest and perspective. But most people, when they're making the film, they're seeing dailies sometimes. And I think it's really cool. We've had this on our last project with Bindu, but we had an editor on site, like already editing some of the sequences together to kind of see if we were missing any footage and to kind of, link together what was being planned. So even though you're not necessarily fully in post mode, often by the time that your film is in the can, you already kind of know what's there and what you have to work with. So really just taking like a little bit of time to kind of marinate, step away from it, and kind of, evaluate it. I wouldn't recommend waiting too long, because then it becomes that like thing that you don't want to get to.
Yeah.
It just seems too monumental. But I think rest is good. I'm like, I wouldn't be ready to like jump into editing this before Christmas, for example. I don't think I'm editing this one, but I might. I have had to before. Things like that.
Surprise.
And
Yeah.
sometimes
That's
there's a
usually how you wind
schedule
up
that's
accidentally
It's
editing
determined.
something.
There's a post
there's
schedule.
a schedule determining the kind of rest that you get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Though I will say that there's not many directors that I know. They all, at least the feature ones, they put in 2, 3, 4 weeks that they're going to step away from it. They're going to take the family to Barbados and, do something relaxing.
Well,
and
they're
then
planning the whole time about
right, and then you
stuff.
find out that they cancel the trip and they're back in the edit room like after 4 days.
Yeah,
because they can't stand not being near their baby.
And their family
it's like
hates
leaving
them.
your
Yeah.
child,
Yeah.
and you
Well,
are
you
going to
can-
have to give it up one day.
Yeah, you've been riding a high, right, for such an amount of time. It's like kind of you're still riding that adrenaline spike. I remember when I directed my first short film, and it was just like it was a gauntlet of like a 12-day shoot, and it was just, and I didn't realize that. And after the shoot had wrapped, I came down, and the following day I was up like at 6 a.m. in the morning, frantically cleaning out my car like with a toothbrush because I needed to be doing something, like I couldn't rest or sit down. Like I was just like every crumb or anything, I was just going to make that car the most spotless it possibly could be at 7 a.m. in the morning the following day, because I just couldn't like sit still, because you're just on that high for like ever.
It takes a minute to decompress and like get back into like a regular life. Because the last 2 movies I got to go away and make, which was really just like and also it was COVID, so it was really a bubble. It was just us making the movie and then coming back and then, being thrown into like being a mom and like giving out snacks and packing school bags. And you're just like, what is going on?
Right. Yeah. Whiplash. Yeah.
What's going, so it's definitely takes some. I'm like, there needs to be like a middle ground where they put you in like somewhere and like decompress you and then back into like
a decompress chamber.
Yeah, but instead you just take a flight and you're like, hi, mom's back, what's going on here, everybody okay? Cool, right. Let's do this, and it's like, it's weird,
kids don't give you that break when you come back.
No, they're like, Mom, stop!
Kids are like, where have you been? Me.
And I have a 5-year-old, so he's like here the whole time, and I come me. It's awesome because I miss him too, but it is weird when you come back.
There's a question in here that I think is a good one. Well, they're all good. What's the elephant in the room in today's Hollywood?
What's the what?
Swing.
Elephant in the room
in today's Hollywood. That's a tough one. You can marinate on it.
There's the things you can say and the things you can't say.
How hard of a truth are we going?
It depends on the room.
Heads up.
I mean, it depends on the room. I mean, yeah, if you're, like the elephant could be, wow, Alec Baldwin was going to be in my next movie. I mean, it could be, it depends. There's always, I mean, it's a good question. There's always, an elephant, at some point.
Maybe
each
of us, maybe each of us have our own elephant, like the thing you don't want to say. Because I've got one, and it's maybe like, it's going to make me the elephant in the room, which is that a lot of people, not me the elephant, but like, we don't necessarily always talk about it, but a lot of people in Hollywood that are able to kind of get up and go and work on this schedule, especially as an up and comer, often have some like wealth or connections behind them. Like, it's easy to like tell a narrative where you're like, this up and coming writer, was discovered, and then you find out that like, oh, they've been living on a trust fund, or they have a parent or somebody, or who's in the industry, so like, wasn't that foreign? And so sometimes that narrative makes it seem like everyone's getting discovered and found but you. And the elephant in the room is that you're probably working just as hard, if not harder, but the connections aren't necessarily there yet for you for that advantage that they have. And so, I think the elephant in the room is everyone would love to pretend it's just art, all the time, but the truth is there is financial advantage and disadvantage, and I think we don't want to say it because we want it to be art all the time, but I think we need to acknowledge it, because that's a lot of times where the diversity question and all those things come in, is we do have an imbalance, and it does come down to money. Some people have it and some people don't in this town, and there's a lot of people who are working in this town and they don't get, most people I know that are like working filmmakers and writers are not rich people. It is a small fraction of people. Most people I know are, getting by, paying the bills, nuts and bolts and doing the shoots. And then there are people who are like, don't have to worry about keeping the lights on. And there is a big disparity between that in this town.
And there's also a lot of people who have day jobs, like you, that's right. it's not just this, oh, you get one film made and you're set. You know, we're actually going to do a hard truths about, actually Sadie and I are recording a Reckless Creative podcast. Let's talk about money.
That's great.
Right. You should. Yeah.
People just think you got this and you're set, but the job, I mean, you do. And also when they're buying something, it's not, like Kay was saying, not always about art. It's about, can we make money from this? You know, and you know, you've got this great project, like we, you know, you see it all the time with scripts that win contests, but no one wants to buy it. It's incredible writing, but they just don't want to buy it.
Yep.
Here's a hard truth elephant in the room. Truly, this is always there. And it's especially hard for writers and directors, and some actors. But oftentimes, movies are generally a cynical endeavor for everybody but the writer and director, and maybe, or the other artist on the film, the artist, the creatives, because they are looking, how are we going to make a buck on this? How can we save money here? How can we do this? But they want to make a profit. They want to make some money, and you're often in the room and you're involved in making what you think are decisions that are artistic, that they may be commercial, they may be the best thing for the movie, but it's good for you to know going in that the people you're sitting across from might be nodding a lot at your really great ideas about what's going to make this a great film or an important film or whatever, and they're just counting dollars.
Mhm.
As someone who does producing as well, I have to turn on different brains, because as soon as someone starts telling me a scene and I'm thinking about how we're going to make it, my brain just goes, that's expensive, that's expensive, that's expensive. And then, you know, hopefully, I think if you're producing well, or producing, I think more honestly, the sit down is, what do we need that makes the story good? You know, do we need all of this, or is there some of this flair that won't sacrifice story? But there are other people, as Doug is saying, that are just sitting there going, yes, no, profit. Someone's also mentioning, by the way, on the chat, ageism can definitely be an issue. There's some, I know there's a new fellowship just for women over 40, for example, to help counter that. I think it came out maybe about 2 years ago.
Women, is it the Lynn Shelton one? Is that who it is?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and then I think the Gina Davis Institute may also have something as well. So I just want to acknowledge
40 in horror. There's one that's out. Yeah, there's a bunch of them.
Yeah. So just like I just want to say, like, totally, it is an elephant in the room. So I just wanted to shout them out.
Okay.
Yeah, there's also diversity, which is a big elephant in the room. You know, that folks that look like me are taking away jobs from people that don't look like me. So there's that.
Get talent, girl. And
But
also,
that's only for so long. It was the opposite.
Yeah.
You know, and it's a huge sea change now. And it's, you know, it can feel to a lot of people that the pendulum has overswung the other way, and nobody overcompensates in the short term like Hollywood. No one does. It's a very shallow place.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, you know, the good part about the pendulum swinging so hard the other way is they're going to find a lot, I think, eventually, that talent is talent is talent. Capability is capability is capability. That really doesn't matter your sex, your gender, your color. You know, are you making compelling work? And that's all that matters.
I actually did a really good, very, very lengthy interview with Catherine Clinch at the WGA, who does a lot of work with ageism. And it was a super long conversation, but I'll get that written up for Pipeline Artists because she has some interesting thoughts about that. There's a couple questions that I kind of want to merge together, because one of them was about how do you, at what point do you give up on a script? Like, do you go all the way through the first draft before and then realize, And also for Doug, because this may be another answer to what to do with that script that maybe isn't working as a script. Doug writes novels as well. So somebody wanted to know if you had written script versions of those novels, or just are your novels and your screenplays.
I've done it all. Scripts and novels, novels and scripts. Written something as a script and made it a novel. Written something as a novel, or started something as a novel and end up deciding it's a script. It's a process, and I don't know about giving up on scripts. I don't know if I ever gave up on a script. I probably have stories from 30 years ago that I'm still trying to figure out how to make work. But, it's put it down and come back to it. You know what? I'm going to make it really, really short. I think it's Apple Plus or Disney Plus, whatever the Beatle documentary Get Back is, okay, and watch it, even if you're not a Beatles fan, and watch Lennon and McCartney and how they work on something and they just let it go. And they come back to it either an hour later or a month later or three, they just come back to it. They don't, they're never giving up on the idea, but they just let go of it for a while and they go work on something else. So maybe they can come back and get some perspective. And to me, watching that was one of the most precise and acute descriptions of collaborating and writing, and the writers never give up on those ideas, but they do back burner them for a while.
Yeah, I want to jump on that. I agree that I think if you're putting them on the back burner because you don't necessarily know how to move forward, but you think you will, it's good. I think sometimes people back burner things that they're daunted by or they're scared of, and I don't think you should back burner that. I think you should muscle through the pages. So if you're like, I really love this story, but I just can't write this part of Act 2, write a shitty part of that Act 2 and keep going if you think you can get through to the end. But I did have a script that I think I got through the first 2 acts, and I did exactly what Doug and the Beatles did, so it's the right answer, is I basically stuck it in a drawer for about 3 years. And suddenly, during the pandemic, one week I woke up and I realized, now having been 3 years older, I had an ending. And I hadn't had the ending before because, I was asking a question that I was in the middle of 3 years ago, and I didn't know the answer to myself. And so I couldn't write it. I couldn't write it. I could write what I hoped would happen. I could write, my cynicism of, what I feared would happen, but I couldn't write what would happen because I hadn't lived it yet. And so sometimes scripts need to go on the shelf and kind of like marinate like a wine, and help get some of that flavor and perspective, and you'll suddenly look at it. I finished that one and I sent it in like last moment to the Nickel and the Austin, just like, I don't even think I know I proofread the draft, but I don't think I went through a single edit once I was like, okay, it's done. I finished the idea, and I think it's second rounded at Austin this year, and it made like top 10 at Nickel, and it was like, that's a first draft. And so like that was something that had been sitting in the door for 3 years, and I was just waiting for the answer. And so there's nothing wrong with a project if it needs that time.
I think too, to your point, Kay, when you're talking about writing something that's personal and when you're in the middle of it, I think we sometimes feel like we can get some sort of control over that thing that's happening to us by writing about it. And sometimes you need to just let that be and not control it, and let that live out in real life, and then decide later if you want to write about it. Because, might be a great thing to write about that's really personal, deep, and scares you, but sometimes can't quite get it done when you're in the middle of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's all okay for you to sit there and be like, it's in progress. And I think it's just more honest, to yourself. Because I think, again, when I see people write personal stories, often I've read for contests, and I've read many scripts. I think we stopped counting a couple years after graduation. I think I was like, I hit 1,000, and after that I was like, let's just assume from now on I've read many scripts. And a lot of people write what they hope will happen, their best hopes and dreams, and the ending is just full of, you know, usually happiness and fantasy and everything they want to happen. And it's sweet, like you get to kind of look in their psyche and you can see all their hopes and dreams, but it's not necessarily a satisfying ending of the story because we're reading, suddenly it goes into fantasy.
Yeah.
So if you have something hard out there, it's okay. You know, you'll get through it. I promise. And then we'll want to know your truth.
Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about working for hire, like tips on working for hire and navigating it? And this person specifically was asking, they're doing their first work for hire screenwriting job. And it's a biopic, and talking about navigating that, the research and the treatment phase of the work for hire.
Okay, first of all, I'm jealous. I love writing historical stuff. So already like, oh, you're in the best part. But anyway, that's just me being a cheerleader. Do you guys have some ideas on that?
I've treated I've mostly work for hire in my life. My most, sadly for me, almost most of my success has been work for hire. The stuff I've been more passionate about, personal about, you know, has not been, you know, realized and such, at least on film. Work for hire, it's, you know, they're hiring you because they like something in you. And I try and make sure they know in advance what they're going to get. If I'm getting hired on a rewrite, I'm telling them in advance what I'm going to do. And I try and make sure we're all in general agreement beforehand before I do it.
Mm-hmm.
But I also try and make it my own. Not that I'm trying to take from the previous writer or the other work. Because for writers, a lot of the work for hire stuff is rewriting. That's a hard truth. And it's really hard.
Yeah.
Make it your own. And you're trying to help them, and I try and make it my own. I'm not there's some writers that are really good at writing from a kind of shallow, cynical, you know, dress it up and make it look good, sound good place. I've never been good at that. I always have to love it, you know, the way I love everything else. So I just try and fall in love with it and do really good work. That's gotten me success. It's gotten me fired. But that's always been my process. I try not to say yes to anything that I don't really, really want to do, despite the number of zeros that are on it, because that's where the mistakes get made.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think especially as a new writer, you get so excited when you get a work for hire and somebody wants you to make something and there's a dollar amount that you're willing to say, yes, I'll do it. I'll do anything. And I've worked for hired for like, I don't know if many of these scripts have seen the light of day. I'm not sure. But, you know, you say yes to everything. And then you start to realize you're spending all this time. Maybe you feel this way, you know, writing something you're not excited about when you could be writing or working on something you are. And suddenly that time feels like it's the worst time. You know, it's like nega creative time. Like if creative time and being happy and creating is like a plus, it's like a negative where you feel like you're mind draining and you feel basically like you should be doing anything else. And so I think work for hire in general, like it's exactly what Doug was saying. Like there should be something about it that you find pleasant and enjoyable out of it. Even sometimes I've been hired because it's a problem that needs to be solved. One time I was hired on a project where they're like, this person has a boyfriend and everyone who reads them hates him. But we need people to like him. Can you make people like him? And I read it and I was like, and this is very general because I don't want to give out any particulars for the creators, but like maybe he's an asshole. And it was a broad but correct observation. And I suggested some un-asshole things he could do. And suddenly it was like amazing. So like, I don't know if I was really like recreating the Mona Lisa there or anything, but I actually liked redeeming a character there and giving him, you know, qualities to like. So that particular project, even though it wasn't like my genre or thing, I was like, oh, this is a great puzzle I enjoy solving. This is something where like it was nice to see somebody take another read and go, oh wow, I really like this guy now. And so you don't always have to be so, I think, emotionally invested, but you know, depending on the length and time of the project, as long as you're like invested creatively in some way. So that's something to toss out there. As far as the doing something that's a biopic and you're doing something, I'm guessing you're doing it off of like a nonfiction. The only thing I want to warn is sometimes when people do a nonfiction or it's based on reality, people end up wanting to just kind of like take those moments from the actual character's life or the story and kind of literally do it. But movies are very emotional. So I would say when you're going through the nonfiction, I would pay attention more to the points in the person's life or the situations that really rung true emotionally than getting the accuracy down. Because people will never necessarily remember like, oh, it was definitely 1847. I can tell. But they will remember like, oh, that's when that person got their heart broken, or that's when that person had their success. So like, make sure to hang your hat on the emotional triumphs and not on just like the dates and facts.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a really good point.
Embrace the pressure and deliver.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well.
Yeah, that's good.
We've got just a time check. We've got just a little under 10 minutes left. So
okay.
Yeah, you want to do some rapid fire?
Fly through some of this stuff. Somebody asked a question, which constantly you hear people saying like, how did that get made? Like you're watching.
Right. How did that piece of crap on Netflix get made? Yeah.
Like, yeah. Like my husband will turn to me and say, they made that? Like, like what's wrong with you? Like they made that.
They made those things to give us hope that we can do better.
And you know,
I have no idea why they make those things.
Curious minds would like to know, how do bad movies get made like that? Just curious. How does that happen?
Why?
There's no 10-second answer to that.
No.
So complex.
I would argue they're not always bad to everybody. There are movies I sit and I'm like, this is agony. I cannot believe anyone would love this movie. And then I go on IMDb and I'm like, look at all these people who love this movie. Wow, so many people love this movie. And then when we got our movie hit IMDb, I think the first thing we got was like a negative review, a D. I think we got a D- or a D. And I was like, oh, somebody doesn't like my movie. And so you start to kind of become humble about it, which is that, you know, some people are always.
Someone's probably watching and go like, who gave these guys money to make it? The answer is nobody.
No one sets out to make a bad movie, but a lot of decisions go into turning it into a bad movie, much of which are financial and risk averse.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, we're going to cast that guy, that bad actor, because that bad actor secures our foreign back end.
Right.
We're going to secure, you know, we're going to hire that so-and-so because he does stunts really cheap, you know, and there's a lot of, you know, but people generally don't start off trying to make a bad movie.
Don't set out to make a crappy movie.
No.
Just
and if they did, it was probably, if they did on purpose, it'd be brilliant. Yeah.
There's also just so many layers of notes that come into movies. You know, the last one I had the most notes and voices that I'd ever had to listen to. I was just like, what is this? This is unique. And often they were in conflict with each other. And then it just became like, whose note supersedes someone else, and that's whose note gets listened to. And even if you completely disagree with it, there's only that much you can do, especially when I, as a director right now, I don't have final cut. So you're just sitting in the room, like advocating really hard to get as many people on your side that is a bad idea. It is not the smartest move. These are all the reasons why it dilutes something else. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you just go like, all right, okay.
Speaking directly to that question, you know, Netflix, including Amazon and elsewhere, it's not that Netflix said yes to it. Netflix paid a very small licensing fee probably to pay it. And there is a business model out there with a lot of actors in it, one of whom I work with a lot, where the movies that are designed themselves not to be bad, but there's a financing formula flying around out there that a lot of these actors are jumping onto, and producers with a bad script and certain actors can get a certain guaranteed amount to finance the movie, and it's just bad at the beginning. They'll take a bad script, they'll pay the actor an obscene amount of money for 3 days work, and you're seeing a lot of that on Netflix right now.
Content.
That's good to
Yeah.
know.
Quick thoughts on MFA programs. Worth it, not worth it?
Ooh,
I
thumbs
think
down.
Ooh.
you can
Ooh,
go
cruel.
if you can get an MFA where you are not in debt, so figure out some financial thing where you can make it work. I think it's good. But if you're going to go into crazy amounts of debt to go to a school where your outcomes may or may not be what you want, then don't do it. There's a lot of other ways you can learn to do what you need to do.
Can I quote George
Yeah, I
Lucas
mean-
on this?
Oh, here we go.
When he came to talk to my film school when I went there, and it was the best thing. Film school is about what you put into it, not what you get out of it. So
Yeah.
it's a if you treat it as a laboratory where you get to experiment and work on your skills, it's amazing. BFA, MFA, whatever. If you're expecting them to teach you, yeah, no, it ain't gonna happen.
Nope.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm gonna say, like, I love getting my MFA, so I'm always gonna be one of the people who says yes, do it if you're doing it for the right reasons. Because I didn't come from film, I didn't have that film language down. My undergrad degree is in biology, and I thought I was gonna be a pharmacist for a brief amount of time. I was wrong, thank goodness, because they stand a lot. I mean, I run around on set a lot, but I don't have to stand, and so it's different. It's better. No, but I was gonna say, when I got to film school, it's especially like a arts program, it's exactly what Doug is saying. Like, there were certain people who every day were like volunteering to write scripts for people. They wanted to work on sets on the weekend. I picked up a lot of, even though I was part of the writing community, I started working on sets with various people and networking. And I think Protner remembers I used to do like wardrobe and art department, but I was a grip, a gaffer. No, I didn't gaff, thank God. I was a grip. I did lighting, and electric. Yeah. And then, I did all sorts of stuff, and then producing. So all of a sudden, when I left film school, I had all these people in my network that I had worked with, and not just like schmooze and had drinks with, but they're like, I stayed up with like Kay until 6 a.m. outside of Starbucks watching a Jenny. Nobody showed up to pick it up. Like, I know Kay will be out there holding a cold cup of coffee and wait with me. And it was kind of like we did stuff in the trenches that people are like, I know Kay is somebody I want to work with. And you already do that by kind of like building those connections and proving yourself in film school. Plus, I didn't have the education. So it was really great to like be caught up to speed by people who are excited about movies and not like wanting to shame me if I was like, hey, what's MOS? I don't know what that is, and be taught. So,
Yeah, and you
but it
learn,
depends.
you learn so much from your peers.
Yeah.
I learned most of the stuff from watching people who are just a year ahead of me do things, and I'm like, if they can figure that out, like, I'm gonna figure it out.
Yeah, but if film school is not your path, which is fine, that there's no one way to do it. Volunteering and working on sets is a huge thing.
As good.
People can take a warm body, and they'll be so grateful to have you, and they'll start calling you back for paid positions. And you'll build your network that way as well.
I think a lot of people also think like going to school equals like getting a job. In a lot of programs that might be true. In film school, that is not true. It is finish school, and then like 8 other things have to go exactly right for you to get where you want to be. But it really teaches you the hustle. It shows you how hard it can be. And it really teaches you like a lot of things, like I'm being on set, is even the language, like Kay said, is if you don't know it, you could be a real fish out of water. And it kind of really teaches you sort of the way to function in this industry, which I think is valuable. Is it worth to 400,000? I don't know, but it's worth it.
So before we wrap this up, I want to say to people, there's some questions we're not going to be getting to because we're just about out of time. But So when we send you the follow-up email with the link to the recording in a couple of days, we're going to add everybody's Twitter handle to it. So you can feel free to tweet them and ask them questions and whatnot. I'm sure you
Oh
guys
yeah, that'll be fun. Yeah.
I'm volunteering it for you.
Sure.
Yeah,
No, I mean it.
you can give them my Twitter account, but since I am very unlikely to respond to much on Twitter anymore. So I'm happy to actually just give my email to anyone who had a question and didn't get it answered, and I'll try and come up with something.
Okay.
So
as our final question, there's a couple people asking about advice to those writers and filmmakers starting out after they get out of school, or maybe even like I didn't start doing this until I will not say how old. And so but just to people who, regardless of age, but to people who are out there just trying to make it happen, like what would be maybe the thing you wish you knew before you started, or the thing that you wish somebody had told you, or that you would like to tell them? Who wants to go first?
Yeah, I was gonna say, celebrate small successes and milestones. There's a lot of people who are like, well, I'm not a famous screenwriter yet, so I failed. But really, it's, did you finish your script? Did you get your pages in? Did someone read your work? Did you get notes and it turned out they liked that scene? Did you enter a contest and find out you got, a positive feedback and you made it into, quarterfinals? Or, it's those little things along the way that you can sit there going, ooh, that's great. You work on set and get new experiences, a COVID officer or PA, or, somebody who is working as grip. And so if you can sit there and every day go, I'm progressing and I'm learning something new, or I'm improving something, it's those little baby steps. I think we don't give enough value to them when we're trying to do our creative endeavors. And so we often feel like we have this weight of failure on us, but it's really kind of more of a growth and blossoming. So pay attention to those and give yourself that celebration, because it will motivate you to keep going. Feeling like shit never motivates you to keep going.
Good. Sure. I think what I wish I'd known when I started off is that it's going to take a while. That it's a long game. It's not something. It happens for people where it's overnight, and that is awesome. But don't gauge your journey by those benchmarks. That is not what happens for everybody. Like Kay said, just keep doing the thing that you want to do in the smallest way. Don't wait to be discovered, because that's not happening to everybody. Put yourself out there, make work, and also be your biggest champion, because especially for, I think, creative folks, we're not great at like selling ourselves, but try to do that in like the smallest ways you can. Be active in the community, give back. It helps, because someone will lend a hand down the road. Make your film community, make your film buddies, make things. That's my thing. Don't wait. I had to go get a regular job so I could make things, because I didn't have anybody here. I came here as an immigrant and had no family. So no couches I could, no couch surfing possibilities. So I had to get a job. So it took me a little longer to like make things happen. But, my film community kept me from not giving up, and I think it's doable. If I can do it, you can do it.
And also, I love that you have the scene stealer in the background, your little dog.
Yeah,
the dog's
that
been
little
working.
guy back there. I seriously thought it was a rabbit.
Journey.
I thought it was a rabbit the first time I saw it, but maybe it's just because Doug has rabbits in my head.
Put rabbits in our mind today.
Oh, nice.
And mouths.
Her name is Luna.
Yeah.
She is wonderful, and she
Hey,
likes to
Luna.
hang out with me.
Oh, she's awesome.
Luna, yeah. Oh,
Now that we've made it
Luna's
hard
been
for
here
you,
every
Doug.
step of the way.
Sorry,
Now-
Doug.
What's that?
Now that we
You're-
made it
you're-
hard for you, Doug, to go last. After
Oh
word of
no, it's
wisdom.
real. This is just on top of everything Kay and Pratna said. There's not a single person I know in show business that. Let me put it this way. There are a lot more relentless people who are successful in show business than talented people. Now that can sound hard and daunting.
Mhm.
The key is You need to, because you need to find that relentless thing in you. Okay. No, it doesn't mean that everyone is out there just with all this energy in the world, pounding on everything. Everyone has found that relentless thing, that water torturous thing inside of them that they're willing to pursue without end. And it, and you got to channel that inside yourself. As talented as you may feel you are, it is competitive. So, it's the same. Prana said, don't give up, stick with those peeps of yours and stuff like that. Just find that thing inside of you that pushes all the time. And that's what I wish I knew. I'm glad I didn't. I probably had it in me, and I'm lucky. But everyone in show business has that.
Mhm.
That's also like a whole other question. Like, what are you glad you didn't know?
That it was this, because I may have quit.
Like everything.
Exactly. I think it's probably good you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
Well, we
Ignorance
just
is
wanna-
bliss in some regards.
Yeah, it is. Well, we just want to thank you guys so much for doing this. And
Yes, thank you.
And everybody out there, watch for your email, and Ruth and I will be in touch with all and coming up with ideas. And if you also have other ideas, or lovely listeners of other classes you'd like, just feel free to email us at symposium@pipelineartist.com. So
We
thanks a
love
lot,
ideas.
everybody. Yeah, thanks, and have a
Thank
great
you,
night.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Happy
Good
holidays.
night. Good night.
Bye.
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 Watch Pratna's movie.
Yes, do that.
December
Next
17th.
Friday.
December 17th.
No one
Come
has
on,
plans
thanks,
but that.
guys.
All right, bye.
All right.